Hello and welcome to the HealthTech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas. I'm the CEO of HealthLaunchpad, who's the sponsor of this event. But I also sponsor, the other sponsor of this event is our great friends at HIMSS, the Healthcare Technology Association. Everybody knows HIMSS, and we are very grateful to them for all of their support. Also grateful to you for listening or watching, however you're consuming this. If this is your first time listening, you can subscribe on Apple or Spotify or Amazon or whatever app you use. You can also watch this on YouTube. And if you're really interested in this, which I think you will be, because it's going to be a good discussion, we're also going to write a blog post about this. So you can find that on healthlaunchpad.com. All right, enough of that stuff. Let's get on with the show. I want to introduce our two guests today who are here to help me talk about a topic we've never covered. And that topic is all about programmatic advertising. So I've got my great friend, Mr. Scott Stedman. Scott, tell us about yourself.
Well, hello there. I just noticed we have to rename this Three Guys in Glasses, right? I mean, this is, I love that, like, we're all lined up. So I'm really pleased to hear.
It's going to sound great on the podcast if you're listening to it.
All right.
Mirage of intelligence.
You can't see how great. So I am the founder of a B2B agency called the Imaginarium. And one area that we have increasingly started working a lot in is programmatic marketing. I'm very excited to speak with you all about that here.
Fantastic. Well, welcome. And also I want to welcome to the show, Paul Vandre. Paul Vandre has been on the show once before. Paul is an account director with HealthLaunchpad and on all things digital marketing guru. Paul, welcome. Say hi.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me back on. Excited to talk about the exciting world of programmatic advertising.
Programmatic, yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, programmatic has been around for a while. I mean, I've been in digital marketing for almost as long as there's been digital marketing. I'm no kidding. I got in the 90s. And programmatic, I think, sort of became a thing 15, 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. It seems like it's actually really only started to be a big thing in B2B relatively recently. I mean, Scott, start us off. I mean, for anyone listening to this, particularly for the healthcare marketing audience who may be kind of new to this programmatic thing, how would you explain programmatic advertising in the simplest terms?
So yeah, and I will say you're exactly right that it has become a bigger part of the B2B motion right now, and there are very specific reasons for that. Some are innovations, some are kind of evolutions of mindset. But programmatic advertising is effectively a way to buy media by audience, but using an ad tech product to buy by the audience instead of by the publication, right? And so it allows marketers to engage in a real-time bidding system to identify their audience and purchase it at scale, at the scale that they want, and it's very efficient. It's a very powerful way to engage the specific audience you want. But to your point, I won't go on too long. But you have made a very interesting point that it is kind of like something that's percolating in B2B, and that's really because of the advent over the past 5 years of these account-based marketing platforms, because since B2B is so much about targeting an account and not actually like a persona, which is how historically, demographic information, demographic stuff like this, how programmatic audiences were built, it didn't have as much application for B2B. Things like 6 Sense, demand base, et cetera, have really paved the way for allowing B2B marketers to use those same tools, but to also narrow it down to the accounts that they're targeting.
Yeah, and it's just to be clear, the format is banner ads that appear on websites where your accounts go. Is that right? Is it just banner ads?
No, I mean, I think some of those ABM platforms are limited to what you would call programmatic display, but you can buy programmatic radio. You can buy programmatic outdoor now. You can CTV is bought programmatically. So all those 30-second spots that you're seeing when you're watching, your streaming network, that's all able to be bought or the vast majority of that is able to be bought programmatically. So programmatic display is, I think, what we think of typically when we think of programmatic advertising, I would argue that there's a lot more exciting ways to use programmatic than just popping up on the side of of a publisher.
Right, got it. Okay, Paul. Let's talk. Talk specifically about healthcare. I mean, that's the listeners are mostly from the healthcare space. Is there anything kind of unique about the healthcare market that people should be aware of when it comes to programmatic?
Yeah, I mean, I think with healthcare, the real challenge is that most of the buyers at these accounts are pretty inundated, especially if you're in senior positions. There's there's so many people that are trying to sell to you at any given point, and so they're really inundated with marketing messages. And then also, I mean, typically the challenge is that a lot of these buyer cycles are pretty complex and they take a long time. And then also the buyer groups are typically pretty expansive, involve multiple approval levels. There's a lot of regulatory concerns. So it's a really complex buying decision. So you have to factor that in when you're doing a marketing play into these accounts. I mean, other things that are just kind of smaller, it's just, so there's some things that just have a lot of regulatory constraints and compliance that you have to be concerned about from a marketing perspective. And I think something that's even a little bit encouraging from a marketing perspective is I think people in healthcare tend to work from home a little bit less. So in some ways, it's a little bit easier to get at them at their workplace, because a lot of them are tied to a physical workspace and in a way that some other industries aren't. That's obviously not universal and it's subject to change, but it is a little bit easier to get people at their workplace in healthcare than it can be in some other industries.
So you can target based on the work IP. Is that right? Is that why that's
target and track, right? So you can see if they're visiting your website, for example, from an IP address that's associated with a specific location and a specific account. And also if you're wanting to venture out into doing more physical types of advertising or marketing outreach, doing direct mail pieces or things like that, where you wanted to send it to people, then that's possible as well in a place where you have an expectation that they're actually going to be at their workplace.
Yeah, can you play that out a bit? I mean, walk us through a real example of that. Because we use it all the time in the work that we're doing with various clients. So give us an example of how you'd use programmatic in a pipeline growth campaign.
Yeah, so I mean, really what we're trying to do with our campaigns is focus on the audience first, right? So we want to determine who are the target accounts that really fit neatly inside that ICP. And ideally, even within that target audience, we're trying to find accounts that are showing some level of intent. So accounts that, and that could either be from first-party data, so you've tracked them on your website, you've seen them on your webinars, you've seen them downloading your content, so you're seeing it firsthand, or using secondary intent tools that are giving you signals that they may be in market for the types of things that you're offering. So we're focusing on the account.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you mean like third-party intent data, like 6 Sense or Bombora?
Yeah, Bombora.
Or
Yep, exactly. And so once you kind of identify the audience, the accounts, you're focused on who the buyer group is, both who the likely buyers and decision makers are going to be, but who the potential blockers or people that are going to be approvals. And so you're building up this group, and then you're going out. And for us, we're really focusing on like a multi-channel, omni-channel approach, right? So we're trying to figure out where are these people are going to be active? What is our budget? How can we maximize our budget to reach them across multiple different channels? So that could be anything from, hey, we want them to see our ads when they're on the internet, browsing healthcare-related websites. So we could be purchasing that through something like a programmatic display ad network. We want them to be seeing us on LinkedIn when they're on LinkedIn, right? Being active there, so we can do ad buys on LinkedIn. And maybe looking at something where we're trying to get them on video platforms like YouTube. And there's other ways to do tracking where you can do more one-to-one type outreach. If you know who it is that you're targeting, being able to reach them on platforms that maybe even aren't as B2B focused, like a Facebook or an Instagram, to be able to try to get in front of them, not from based off of the, just based off of knowing who the specific buyers are that you want to reach. And then for us, we're just trying to get them in as many channels as we possibly can, because we know that not everyone's going to be active everywhere. And there's going to be a lot of messages that are going to be missed because there's so many different messages that are being put in front of a buyer at any given point.
Yeah, I want to go back to actually something that Scott was saying earlier on, because it started primarily as a B2C tact channel, and there you're targeting persona. So persona might be, the sports, the sort of the male jock who's sort of like watches college football, does sports, does fancy.
Three guys in a glasses. We're just obsessed with sports jocks.
Yeah, exactly. So that's in B2C, I can see why you target individuals, but we started talking about we're targeting accounts. However, within the accounts, we're targeting personas. So how does that work? Sort of like the differentiation in the targeting versus account versus persona. Scott, you want to take that?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, it is like anything, and this is why B2B is such a data-rich kind of motion, right? Because it is, at the end of the day, there is an alchemy to find to the data you use to find those audiences, right? And how you assemble that has to be very thoughtful. I think the big innovation, which is changing, a lot of the data tools have always been in the programmatic marketplace for B2B users, with one exception, right? It wasn't that easy to sort of limit the audience by account. And then, by the way, I really have to emphasize this, and then measure by account, right? So even if you could then buy by account, but then at the end of the day, you were getting measurement that was not consistent with that, it made it much more difficult to tell the story and to optimize efficiently and to understand if the job was being done by each one of the campaigns that you were running. So Steve. Oh my gosh, look at that.
We'll fix it in post.
I can't remember the last time we had a big sneeze.
No,
Maybe first.
Get the editors on that one, right? I mean, I feel like it's out. Like I was just watching Alan Partridge. He's like, "Oh, we'll edit that one. We're playing it live. It's live." All right. So anyway, there's a unique alchemy, kind of the stew that you sort of assemble to find that audience that is going to be have a high propensity to buy or be a part of either the identifiable buying committee or what they call like the dark buying committee, that those people influence the decision that you can't necessarily so simply identify. And so the big innovation is the account and the ability to target by account and measure by account. But then beyond that, you're getting firmographic data. You're building kind of more of a persona behind that, right? Using job titles. You're using great intent data providers. Like the ones we were just describing before, potentially technographic data, right? Like, oh, these are, they have this platform, they might have a higher propensity to buy our product, et cetera.
Okay, that helps clarify it. One of the things that we're obsessed with as a B2B marketer, particularly in healthcare, where the sales cycles are so bloody long, right? The average sales cycle in healthcare, according to HIMSS, 13 plus months. And in many cases, it's even longer, like 24 months. How do you use programmatic throughout the buyer the buyer journey?
Yeah. Do you want me to jump?
Sure. Yeah. Why don't you start and then Paul?
I can be super quick about this because, like anything else, it's like it's assigning the job that needs to be done, right? So I think that we think of long buying cycles because we're so often judged by business performance. But I think a good marketer is going to really not be daunted by the long buying cycle, because you recognize that within that buying cycle, there are a lot of distinct jobs that need to be done right now. And you're going to create your measurement against those goals. For example, if there's this 95-5 rule that LinkedIn talks a lot about. 5% of your target, your addressable market is in market for you at any given moment, but you have to be generating awareness for that other 95%, because by the time they're in market for you, they likely already have the solution in the back of their mind, and there's a lot of data to support that. So if you need to generate awareness, that's a job to be done right now, and you want to be measuring that against awareness across your addressable market. If you're nurturing and retargeting and finding someone who's already in your pipeline, et cetera, there's a different job to be done. There's a different campaign that you're going to be running, and you're measuring against that. So getting out of the mindset, staying in the mindset of business performance, but not being daunted by it, and sort of assembling the KPIs that need to be done within that journey.
So Paul, just to build on that point, I mean, take us through a specific healthcare buyer journey, starting with a problem, moving on to thinking about solution and evaluation, and how, how you might change up the messaging, how you might change up the way that you use programmatic. I mean, take us through the life cycle of a programmatic campaign.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, ultimately, what to Scott's point is what you're really trying to do for everyone is paint a favorable view of your brand, your value prop, right? So that the goal would be of all the potential buyers is you want as many people to know about you and feel good about you as possible, right? So early on, like before you've identified accounts that are in market, really what you're focusing on is reinforcing what your value proposition is, being a service to the industry, providing good content, getting your message out in front of people in a way that's a helpful way, even if they're not necessarily looking for your solution at the time. So that could be, just focusing more broadly with useful content that reinforces your value prop, right? And then once you start to see some intent, either from first party or third party data that's suggesting that, okay, they might be in a buyer motion, that's when your content would shift more towards focusing on how your product differentiates itself, how it works relative to your competition, how it's going to solve the problems that company might be facing, and how it's going to make you as the buyer look like the hero in your organization, right? So it's really trying to build that value for the brand and for your product more specifically. And then once you're getting more close to the decision, and then when they're entering into the sales pipeline, that's when you're trying to resolve common concerns that you might see in the buyers in that decision. You're trying to reinforce with case studies and other kind of customer testimonials that are going to really help them to be able to feel like they're to relieve the fear of making the decision and making the wrong decision, right? And then once they're in the sales cycle, that's when you're, again, just trying to reinforce and work closely with sales to try to be more personalized, more one-to-one, and helping to build the case for the product and for the company.
Got it. And so, getting tactical here, early on, you might actually use programmatic because it's quite efficient to reach your total target account list. And then as you start to see intent and you start to see, and that you might use like thought leadership, sort of general sort of upper funnel type messaging. As they're moving through the funnel, you get more targeted, you're selling the value prop of the company. And then as you really start to see engagement, as I understand it, you can actually, with some of the platforms, turn up the dial on one particular account, like, Adventist Health. It's like, okay, we see Adventist Health here is spiking. Let's just turn up the dial and target them specifically. I don't know that you can do that with all of the platforms, but understand that some of the platforms allow you to get really precisely targeted to a specific account. Is that,
absolutely. True? I think that's possible to an extent for pretty much all these programmatic platforms. There's some that require you to have kind of larger minimum audiences to protect the privacy of the companies or the individuals that you're marketing to. So they may require you to have 300, 400 potential users in your audience, but to some extent, you're going to be able to really narrow in on the accounts that you want to double down on. And that's the real power of it, is that you don't need, millions of dollars in investment to be able to get into an account. It can be really kind of very manageable budgets, and you're still feeling like you're ubiquitous and that they're seeing you everywhere, only for a pretty marginal budget.
This is why I keep coming back to this account, because it limits there's so much inventory in the programmatic universe. When you throw an account filter on there, that universe really shrinks fast. Mm-hmm. And that's why, from my perspective, for B2B, where the average contract value is so substantial, the size of the prize is so significant. You look at things like CTV, you could have like a hospital administrator sitting on their couch on a Saturday watching a sports game and suddenly see a health tech solution pop up in the middle of a basketball game or something, or during the middle of an Avengers movie. And, their kids are like, what the heck is this? And that administrator is like, wow, that's cool. Like,
And you could be a small brand sitting next to IBM and Nike and whoever else, right?
The amount of attention that a personally relevant B2B ad is going to get on CTV right now, in my opinion, it's the most underbought channel for our industry, both health tech and B2B systemically. And I just think it's like, you know, the CPMs are high, but who cares about a CPM? You know, you're talking about another $10, $20 CPM when you're talking about a total, you're getting in front of your entire, you know, it's so modest compared to the value of it, you know?
Yeah.
I've got this picture of these awkward conversations going on where, you know, father and son are watching a movie which might have an awkward scene on it that needs explaining, and there's a commercial break and one of the CTV ad comes on and it's like, Dad, I need to ask you something. The dad looks awkward and the kid says, Dad, what is data migration? Why do I need to worry about HIPAA compliance?
That's funny.
That's healthcare creating bonding moments for me. That's
exactly,
an awkward
absolutely,
moment,
and that's what
you know?
we're about. So let's get geeky here. Talk about tech stack here. Is there anything that you need, Scott, from a technology standpoint that's a little different here? How's that work?
Well, so it's a great question, and it's something we've thought a lot about, and you and I have had this conversation kind of offline. You know, so much of the ability to do this work has been on the back of the success of what we call these ABM platforms. I do think that there are now increasingly ways, and I think those platforms are very powerful and very good, and they should be a part of anyone's consideration set. But they're self-service platforms. They take quite a bit of internal change management. They're quite costly. You know, putting a healthy amount of fee. So, I think that there are interesting unbundled solutions where you can now just effectively use programmatic as account-based programmatic as a managed service. And I think there are solutions popping up around that. Apart from that, I mean, so you have to have access to a DSP. You have to have access to a DSP
But what is a DSP?
A DSP, it's a great question. A DSP is what's called a demand side platform, and it's effectively the ad technology that takes all of that supply from around the internet and has created a bidding environment where your media buyers can purchase that advertising.
Can you name some examples?
Yeah, the most famous one and one of the best in class versions is the Trade Desk. Right, so the Trade Desk is by far the Goliath in that space. I mean, 6 Sense and Demand Base both have DSPs. Another word for DSP is a bidder, right? So they have bidders within them. All a bidder means is that you can bid on programmatic media. So 6 Sense and Demand Base. There is another one called Beeswax that a lot of these platforms are actually built on. So I think when you're buying some of these, you're actually using 6 Sense because it's kind of a bidder as a service, so you can add interesting sort of tools on top of it.
So just to play it out in terms of the money. So, you know, marketer X spends $10,000 on programmatic. The Trade Desk, the DSP, distributes that across potentially 100 different websites. So each one gets $100.
Yep.
Or one gets 1,000, another one gets 10, and that's to buy advertising on their platforms at a
exactly right. And then there's all kinds of things you can do. You can buy brand safe tech. You know, you can add. You know, there's comes like integral ad science and stuff like that you can effectively, in that programmatic platform, in that DSP, you can, at a CPM level, add brand safety. You know, there's all kinds of things you can kind of add to that.
So if you're in healthcare and you say, look, you know, we want to reach, healthcare. This is a sensitive issue that we're talking about here. How would you go about sort of insulating for ads from appearing on, adult, porn websites?
Yeah.
Or like websites, like either party.
Depends on the healthcare product, I suppose. But these are
okay.
Anyway, so yes, there are all kinds of. So brand safety is a huge deal. It's something that that has been certainly pioneered by guys like Mark Pritchard at I forget, Procter and Gamble, I think, or maybe.
Oh yeah, that Mark Pritchard. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot. So the big guns have have demanded excellence in this space, right?
Yeah.
It is an evolving area. I think there's a really brilliant guy, Jonah Goodhart, who's building an interesting new company called Mobian that is going to give access to different kinds of tools like this. But this data is accessible through most DSPs in a variety of different ways.
Got it.
Or there are also managed services. I do believe that a lot of our people in this space, a managed service is a better solution because it doesn't take a big staff to do it, and it's oftentimes not even particularly more costly because of the way that these things work.
Explain what you mean by managed services.
It just means you have a team doing it for you. So, for example, there's a company called Nomology. Nomology, it's not programmatic, but it's a way to buy YouTube with brand safe YouTube, and so a company can just put their IO in, and Nomology will build their audience and distribute it on YouTube, right? With best-in-class brand safety. So there's different kinds of solutions like that, both programmatically and on the platforms.
So I want to switch gears and talk a bit about the target technology related to targeting. So, Paul, maybe you could talk a little bit about sort of the device side abilities, because we talked a little bit earlier on about targeting accounts based on IP. We know that that's not particularly reliable, because you're missing so many people that way. But with this type of technology, with programmatic, you can target based on an individual ID. Is that right? I mean, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. This is very much evolving, and it's very much kind of responding to the big players that are kind of balancing privacy and the ability to reach people in a more personalized way. But ultimately, what we're trying to move towards is being able to follow a user in a depersonalized way, in a way that you don't know who they are, but you'll be able to know that a user is the same user across multiple devices, right? So most people have a computer, they have a mobile phone, maybe they have an iPad, they maybe have a second computer that's their work computer, right? So they're active on all these different devices. And the challenge for marketers historically has been to not see those as 4 people, but to see them as one person on 4 devices, right? Yeah. So what the technology is really trying to do is to, and some of this comes from, if you're on a LinkedIn account and you're logged in on all 4 devices, then LinkedIn has a pretty good idea of who you are on all 4 devices, right? Because you're logged in, and they're using their first party data being logged into their service to be able to track, okay, this is the same person logged in multiple places. So ultimately, I think we're kind of just, the technology is evolving in a way to be able to reach people on different devices. What I'm really trying to do is leverage that technology to put the right message in front of the right people on the right devices, and certain people are going to be more wanting to engage in an active way, to do things that require more effort on a desktop than they would be on their mobile phone, for example. And so being able to use their mobile phone for things like video content that they're going to be consuming on there, or content that's a little bit more accessible, makes sense. Whereas on the desktop, they may be willing to do things that require a little bit more effort because it's a little bit easier to interact with the desktop than with the phone.
Yeah, thanks for that. One of the things that I've heard is that there's some debate as to whether or not whether juice is worth the squeeze with programmatic. I mean, Scott, how do you measure the success of this stuff? I mean, what metrics do you use?
Very great question. I mean, programmatic has a reputation as kind of being like the sewer of advertising, right? And I think it is a reputation that has been in some ways deserved, but it's also has a reputation of being insanely efficient and effective, which is also, when done properly, a tool. So why do people keep buying the sewer and growing their sewer budgets? It's because it works. You know what I mean? So I think it is, you really have to understand what you're doing, right? It's not, I would say it is not, it's not like buying a walled garden like a LinkedIn, where it's relatively intuitive. Like, you put in these job titles and these companies and you click go. It's a little bit of a more complex motion that you have to understand, because you really have to understand the data tools that you're using within that ecosystem and the job to be done of each of those campaigns. And then pair that with, in our instance, very, very robust account-based measurement. And when you have that going, I mean, I think it unlocks the best ad inventory in the world, which is things like CTV and stuff like that. So and then you can complement that in an omni-channel way with very inexpensive ads that you're buying so efficiently that it's giving you the benefit of an the building that mental availability that an omni-channel campaign can do while you're still foundationally building it with good inventory paired with.
Yeah. You guys are so much closer to it than I am. So I hope, I'm sure you've got answers to this. But the thing I struggle with is attribution, right? So particularly, you've got a sales cycle, which is 12 to 18 months long. How do you know what the impact was of the programmatic versus maybe a direct mail thing that you sent out versus the LinkedIn advertising versus, anything else?
I mean, from my perspective, there's certainly tools that help you see the interactions that are coming from different platforms, which help paint a little bit of a picture. I think oftentimes as marketers, we ignore kind of the low-hanging fruit, which is just to ask people. Like when you're in with the sales and they're coming in as an opportunity, just taking that time to explore where they felt like they found you, what influences really moved them. It seems pretty obvious, but there's so many companies that I've worked with that rely exclusively on multi-channel touch attribution, but they never actually ask people where they found out about you. And you can learn a lot when you think it's all coming from a certain channel, but then you ask people and everyone says, actually, I saw you on LinkedIn. I saw you on LinkedIn, or, whatever it is, right? There's a lot that can be learned just from asking.
I think that's a really, really great point. And I think pairing that again with good measurement, and again, like at an account level, you can then start. The nice thing about account-based measurement is it's basically translating marketing into the language of sales, right? Because sales speaks the language of the account measured at a domain level, usually because that's how CRM is structured, right? And so since sales is putting all of their data and their knowledge and their aspirations over the next quarter and what they're being bonused off of again into pipeline, you can start delivering marketing influence reports at a pipeline level. And again, like anything, it's a little bit like, well, did that ad really do it? Well, in aggregate, you can start to see a trend that we were getting a lot of impressions and a lot of engagement on advertising, and then those things started accelerating through the pipeline.
Yeah. I think this is good practical advice, because I think there is, sure, you can, the sophisticated ABM platforms will help you get to a greater level of precision on attribution, but it's an expensive way of doing it. So at the end of the day, do you really need to invest that level of, do you need to make that level of investment to figure out whether it was programmatic or LinkedIn that really helped influence the sale? One of the things I think a lot of our clients are always a bit surprised with is actually when we do budget recommendations on spending, they're usually a lot lower than they're used to spending, and that's not just that's LinkedIn and programmatic. I mean, how do you guys, what do you guys think in terms of what they should be spending on this sort of stuff?
Adam, do you want to start, or should
I can start. Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, I'm trying to avoid a cop-out answer here, because you get a lot of those here where it's like, it all depends on your audience and your budget and what your goals are, right? So obviously, we all have to take with the understanding that every company is different, every audience is different, and every goal set is different. But I mean, generally for us, we can, running like a 3 or 4 month kind of test, 10 to 30K investment across a 3 to 4 month test can give us a lot of insights into how these things are working and how your audience is responding to your message. So it doesn't take a huge budget for us to be able to really start to paint a picture for you.
I agree with that. I think part of it, I think understanding the tech stack they come with, right? So for example, if they have account-based measurement in place, it makes it a little bit easier, so there are a few kind of foundational things that you need to figure out. And if not, there's still solutions, right? It's just, they're just a little bit different, the solutions. And then I agree with you that you can, I think we tend to say, I think it depends on how many channels you also want to add in, right? But I think I agree with everything that Paul just said.
Okay, this is great. This has been super helpful and practical. Let's just get to talk about future outlook. Paul, I think you were on the podcast last year talking a bit about cookies. I mean, what's the latest on the deprecation of third-party cookies, and how's that going to help impact Programmatic?
A lot different than last year at this time, right?
Yeah, it's such a start and stop kind of one step forward, two steps back, and a lot of companies are kind of hedging their bets here. But I mean, I think ultimately, because the landscape is a little bit uncertain, the focus really just needs to be on trying to shift strategies in as much as you can towards first-party data strategies, really making sure that you're tracking all the engagement with your brand. And that you have the tech stack in place to be able to capture those motions and to be able to see, okay, who it is that really is engaging with us. The way that that's going to change and your ability to do things like retargeting or advertising based off of specific IP address and cookies, I think is going to be continually evolving. But I think the things that are going to be safe is first-party data, contextual type targeting. So based off of where people are on what type of content they're consuming is always going to be a safe type of investment. And ultimately, I think what we're moving towards is more transparency and more ethical advertising. I think it's all positive. It's just going to be a little bit of start and stop along the way.
So it's sort of like the answer on third-party cookies is next year will be the year that third-party cookies disappears, and it'll always be next year.
Yeah, that's kind of the way it's gone. Yep.
Yeah, so, but I actually don't. I don't even think next year right now. I mean, honestly, right, Paul? I mean, I think I would focus in this space on, again, being thoughtful, best practices, but doing what's right for right now and considering 100%. And I would consider the next 6 to 12 months, and I would not get out over my skis. Okay.
I don't think most companies are really, 3 years ahead in the platforms they're using everywhere. So use what's available to you now, build a good, solid first-party data plan, and then just see how it evolves, and everyone else will evolve with you.
Yep,
so,
I agree.
Well, let's wrap things up. I want to ask you just to sort of give closing advice. Maybe Paul, you could go first, talk specifically for healthcare marketers, and then we'll ask Scott sort of maybe broadly sort of things to think about for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the kind of more pointed pieces of advice that I would give relative to programmatic, and especially if you're just getting started on programmatic marketing, is just test it and learn with it. You don't need big budgets to be able to start to test some of these channels. Do it in a thoughtful way. Ultimately, the power of these programmatic channels is due to their specificity and targeting. And so if you're targeting accounts specifically that you want to get in market and that you want to be able to start to advertise to, you got to do your work to ensure that account set is the right one, right? And have you done the research into determining who your true target audience is and who the ideal account profile looks like for you? Because if you haven't done that, all the targeting in the world isn't going to be efficient for you if it's not the right account set. And then the other thing I would say is just really focus on trying to build the fundamentals of tracking and the ability to look at things from an account level. I think a lot of the times as marketers, we've been trained to focus on individuals and contacts. I think what we're recommending is a shift more towards account focused type tracking and marketing. And that will really unlock the ability to see what's happening at a broader sense at an account rather than just IT director Jim at this specific account, right? So I think those are kind of my main points of advice for someone that's just getting started.
Very good, very practical. Scott, how about you?
I sort of echo it. I would say one, I would also have your ally. I mean, if you're just getting started, I would make sure if you have a friend like Adam or Paul, I would call them, right? I mean, and get started with a partner. I would. But like Paul said, you don't need enormous budgets. You are able to create a very powerful omni-channel motion, and all of the data will tell you It's not like you have just, it's not, this is, there's an exponential impact on that, on the effectiveness of your marketing. So it's not like 1 + 1 is 2 in this situation. When you're able to hit your targets at, through a variety of channels, the effectiveness of all those channels goes absolutely through the roof. So I would say it's a very important thing to get started at, to measure thoughtfully, and make sure, again, what Paul said is that your ICP, your total market, your ICP, your target account lists, these should be foundational to everything that you're doing, right? The contacts will fall out of that. The leads will fall out of that. All those things are part of your sort of your account-based marketing system, right? And if you're doing that thoughtfully, and then you're adding this kind of a fire hose of power into your motion, it will quite quickly deliver exciting results.
I love that thoughtful, just as using it sort of like as a booster on everything, but you got to get everything else working.
I would love to double click on that point. I think if you have a certain amount of budget and investing it all in one channel versus taking that same budget and spreading it out across a true omni-channel, multi-channel, assuming that the budget is sufficient to be able to actually get some decent impressions across those channels. Everything we've seen is the more channels you're on with consistent messaging, the impact is exponential. Like one channel is something, but the omni-channel is everything. It really is critical for this. So I think that's not obviously the easiest thing to get set up, but it is absolutely important if you really want to see the biggest results.
I think that is great advice from both of you, and a great place to leave it. So, Scott, thank you. Tell everybody where if anybody wants to get in touch with you. Yeah.
So the Imaginarium, thank you very much, Adam. So the Imaginarium.agency is our website, and we are would love to chat about this or anything else as far as sort of your account-based B2B challenges go.
Excellent, Scott. Thank you, Paul. How can people reach you?
Just go to Adam, honestly. Adam is the
guy.
No.
It's Paul.Vandre at HealthLaunchpad, and follow you on LinkedIn, although you're not on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to follow me. But,
you're not me.
Yeah,
don't follow me. Follow Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's a smart guy. I learn a lot from Paul every day. So thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed the banter.
Hey, thanks so much, Adam. So impressed with everything you do and with this great community you've built. It's very, it's really important. It's fantastic. I'm so thrilled to have been a part of this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap things up. Hey, if you listen to the show and you thought, hey, that was pretty cool, actually, I might know some people who would find this useful. Just click that little forward button. Please share button. And share it with 2 people. They'll thank you. Certainly, I'll thank you for it. And again, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast application. So thank you again to Scott and Paul. Thank you to HIMS for your support, and thank you to you for listening. So with that, I'll bid you farewell.